Coming up, Northern after the break. Northern Ireland is the first UK nation to impose a circuit break to suppress the rise of COVID.
The Lunchtime News with Lucrezia Millarini.
Good afternoon. Northern Ireland has become the first UK nation to bring in a so-called circuit break to stop the spread of COVID, as cases there put immense pressure on the health service. And in angry clashes in the Commons at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, called for a similar approach for the whole of England. Boris Johnson says he's not ruled out anything. Well, here are the main developments so far today. As part of Northern Ireland's circuit break, schools there will close for 2 weeks, pubs and restaurants for 4 weeks. We'll, of course, have the full detail later on in the programme. The First Minister of Wales is considering a similar approach if COVID numbers continue to rise there. And as of 10 o'clock last night, Liverpool entered a Tier 3 lockdown, meaning bars, pubs, gyms and casinos close. And a government meeting is being held about whether the rest of Lancashire and Manchester will also be moved into Tier 3 status. More on that later too. But first, here's our political correspondent, Libby Vina. Well, let's take a closer look now at what new restrictions in Northern Ireland. Meanwhile, the Mayor of Greater Manchester has joined with council leaders across the region to reject any plans to move it into similar Tier 3 restrictions. Andy Burnham said that without greater financial support, huge parts of the north of England would be trapped in a winter of flawed and damaging restrictions. It comes as government officials meet on whether to add more areas to the highest alert level. Paul Davis. Paul, we also have the leader of Lancashire County Council who believes that further tougher restrictions are necessary there. Well, throughout this second wave, we'll be getting the thoughts and views from our regular panel of guests. Well, some of the day's other news, and the online retailer ASOS has seen its annual profits more than quadruple thanks to cost-cutting measures and as customers returned fewer items during the pandemic. The Duchess of Sussex has said that becoming a parent has made her a more courageous person. Meghan was addressing a virtual summit when she revealed that having baby Archie has made her want to make the world a better place for him, although she did say she remained wary about what she talks about publicly to avoid putting her family in a position of risk. With more, here's Faye Barker. And finally, an 83-year-old grandmother has won a bravery award after battling a robber with her walking stick. That's it. Mary is back at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather, but for now, bye-bye. Hello again. Now, the main stories in London. A 23-year-old has died after being shot in West London. The victim was found injured on Austin Road in Hayes last night. A burnt-out car was recovered a few miles from the scene. 2 men in their 20s have been arrested. A 32-year-old man has been charged after 10 police officers were injured by corrosive fluid during a drug raid in Barnet. London MPs are weighing in on the prospect of a second lockdown as cases of the virus continue to rise. Brian May is calling for a supermarket to scrap plans for building works at a Surrey store, which he says will harm the hedgehog population. The world's largest archive of magazines is under threat due to the pandemic. James High. All right, weather now. Here's Sally. And that's it. I'm back here at 6. See you then. Bye-bye. Night, the capital divided over the threat of tougher COVID restrictions. Good evening. As the potential for stricter COVID restrictions in London seems ever more likely, there is disagreement tonight among the capital's MPs on how far measures should go. Some MPs in outer London boroughs think they should only apply to areas where the infection rates are higher. Others say they should apply London-wide or even nationwide and immediately. In the House of Commons, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer argued it was in the national interest to impose a so-called circuit break limited lockdown. The Prime Minister said nothing has been ruled out. With where we are up to and what happens next, here's our political correspondent Simon Harris. Well, joining me now to talk more about possible time. Well, while the arguments continue about what restrictions should be brought in and when, there is another problem caused by the virus coming down the tracks. The government gave TfL a £1.6 billion bailout in May to see it through the pandemic. On Saturday, that money runs out, and without more funds, services and jobs could be cut. Well, Martin Stew is at Tooting Broadway tonight. Martin, this could go right down to the wire. Well, Martin, what happens if the government doesn't agree to pay? Thank you. A 23-year-old has died after being shot in West London. The victim was found injured on Austin Road in Hayes last night. A burnt-out car was recovered a few miles from the scene. 2 men in their 20s have been arrested. And a man has been charged after 10 police officers were injured during a drugs raid in Barnet. 9 months after a member of the Grenfell inquiry panel had to step down because of links to a cladding manufacturer, a replacement has been announced. Ali Akbar is chief executive of a housing association in Leeds. There had been criticism that the panel lacked insight in social housing matters. Well, evidence is continuing before he starts in November. Rags Martel reports. Before that, all this week, we've been reporting on small independent businesses who came to London to thrive and have been shattered by the effects of the pandemic. In the final of 3 reports, Ria Chatterjee has been speaking to Mohammed Anas, who runs a baklava shop in Acton. As well as financial difficulties, he's had to fight against fake news about the virus, which has put off some of his customers. Mohammed Anas speaking to Ria Chatterjee. Sport now, and England and Harlequins rugby star Rachel Burford is leading the charge to get more girls and women into the sports. Rachel Burford is behind the Girls Rugby Club, a global project that also aims to tackle the negative attitudes towards women in rugby.
Normally like I have to check in, but today I was actually running and I was doing the Daily Mile, which is not for adults, you'll be relieved to hear it's for children, for primary schools, a great and growing scheme to help them Watford.
And finally, tucked away in an old building in the former military arsenal in Woolwich is a treasure trove of written history, the largest collection of magazines anywhere in the world. In total, there are 150,000 of them, dating all the way back to the 1850s. But it is the very present effect of coronavirus which is threatening its future. Katie Barnfield has been for a look around. And that is it for now. We are back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Coming up, Mary with the ITV Evening News. But from me and the rest of the London team, bye-bye.